Hello and welcome to Mindful Living, where we explore the art of living with the intention, balance, and inner peace. I am Avik, your host, guiding you through conversations on health, meditation, mental well being, mindfulness, and the mind body connection. Each episode features expert insights to help you grow, heal, and thrive. So, take a deep breath, relax, and join us on this journey to a more mindful and fulfilling life. So, let's get started.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation is packed with insights on the power of mindset and behavior to help us break free from the patterns that hold us back. Our guest, Dan Storey, is a true expert in behavioral science, personal motivation, and mental transformation. He knows the root causes. And he's not only a master practitioner in NLP, but also an accomplished natural physique bodybuilder, proving that change starts in the mind. And today on Mindful Living, Dan will share the secrets to getting unstuck and creating lasting change by understanding why we do what we do and how to shift it for the better. So let's dive into this fascinating journey of unlocking potential with our guest, Dan Storey. Dan, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to this conversation and that introduction. I'm excited to meet this person. So let's get this show on the road.
Lovely, lovely. Dan, you have dedicated, years behind studying behavioral science and motivation. So, could you share any surprising thing you have discovered about why exactly people get stuck in certain patterns?
Yeah, there's tons of research, and the reason I dived into this field of study is a couple of reasons. Number one, I like to understand how people make decisions. I've worked with salespeople for a very long time, and so understanding decision-making processes is fundamental if we're going to help influence people in the right direction. And then secondly is because I've made some terrible decisions in my time, and I continue to make terrible decisions. So it's nice to understand how and why sometimes these decisions go wrong. But let's talk about one of the surprising things, and that is that our psychology is actually programmed to keep us stuck. We get into this kind of point where we're comfortable, and a lot of people get to this point where they've reached a certain level of success, things seem to be going well, but then all the motivation disappears and we kind of get stuck in this rut, or what I call the trap of average in my book. And actually there's a lot of science behind this, so I'll take you through one piece of research, and that's called the region beta paradox. And so what I want you to imagine is, let's say you've got to go on a journey. Today, I'm in New York. It's a nice sunny day, but it's very cold. All right. But let's say I wanted to go about a kilometer or about 1 mile. Like, how would I get there? I'd probably walk. Like, it's a nice day. It's maybe a 15-minute walk or something like that. It's not the most quick and easy way of getting to my destination, but it's pleasant, right? It's a nice, easy day for a walk. What happens if I stretch that out to, say, 2 miles or 3 miles or 10 miles? At some point, I'm probably going to want to change my vehicle. I'll probably change to a bike or a bus or something like that, or some public transport. So, at some point, let's say 10 miles, I change to a bus because it makes more sense, right? I'm not going to walk 10 miles. I'll end up getting sweaty. It'll take too long, all those things. It's inefficient to walk that. So imagine it. 1 mile I'm going to walk, 10 miles I'm going to take the bus. So the question is, at what point do I change from walking to bus, right? It's a continuum, somewhere between 1 mile and 10 miles. And, everyone's different. We can justify it differently. It'll be based on the weather. It'll be based on how we're feeling on a particular day. But there's a continuum that at some point we decide that enough is enough, and we're going to switch from one inefficient way of transfer or transport to a more effective way. Now, I'm not talking about taking the bus and walking. Let's take this into the concept of somebody's job, for example. Let's say You've got a job that you don't like. You don't like, but you go every single day, but
Uh-huh.
you never change it. You never do anything to get out of that rut. You just like, oh, I carry on going about in my day to day, and it's not bad enough. It's kind of like walking, right? At some
Hmm.
point, it would get terrible enough that you would change your job. Right. Imagine, the worst scenario. Your boss is a complete, I'm not going to use any curse words, but they're not a very nice person. The conditions you're working for are not great. The salary, the money that you're earning isn't good enough to justify going in. That's changing and taking the bus. The question is, where on that continuum does that change happen? It's a continuum, and at some point, and all it is a psychological shift, right? It's a psychological shift from saying things could be worse to this is too much, and we have to go over that line in our head. A lot of people call it rock bottom, for example, but this is a region beast paradox, and it's just a continuum. It's a psychology, but what we're really good at as humans is pushing that point further away from us. So we'll compare it. Maybe I've got a terrible job, but hey, you know what, Dave doesn't even have a job, or Dave has to go through all these terrible things. Oh, yeah, did you hear about Dave? Sorry, Dave, if you're listening, trying to air your dirty laundry. But it's this idea, right? Is that we say, oh, things aren't that bad, or it could be worse, and we justify staying stuck, as opposed to saying this is too much. I'm going to go and do something about it. I'm going to change from walking to taking the bus because I can't carry on walking on this journey.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes it crystal clear, crystal clear, with a very, very simple example, Dan. Okay, so now we have understood what are some common misconceptions people have about changing behavior and creating, lasting transformation.
I think the biggest one. Well, let's
Mm-hmm.
let's do two. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
let's do three. We'll go back. We'll go to the format of the books. Number one is change is possible, but
Mm-hmm.
we often we underestimate what aspects of change we can actually do. We think we can maybe change 1 or 2% and tweak this a little bit, and maybe I'll get a little bit better here. Or in actual fact, we're actually capable of doing a lot more in terms of change. If I think about my bodybuilding journey just very quickly, and I came off the Natural Olympia stage last week, that guy who was on stage there is very different to the person who was starting the journey like 3 or 4 years ago. It's completely different. Now, I couldn't do that in a week. I couldn't do it in 2 weeks, but it give me 3 years or 4 years, I can do something pretty amazing. And so what people often do, and we're in this kind of society now where people want things really quickly, is we aim for quick wins, not something that's more meaningful and substantial. So the example I give is we like microwave meals as opposed to kind of five course gourmet dinners that we've had to spend hours cooking. Where if you've ever had a microwave meal, they're not that enjoyable. We should go for something bigger. So the first thing is to level up your expectation and to really think, I'm capable of more. I deserve more in my life. After that, we've got to realize that there's no reference we have for that. And so, who I am today is a result of all of the decisions I've made over the past however many years, let's say 45. I have loads of reference points over that time to say, Dan, you are this person. This is your identity. You can reinforce that over and over again. And so if I look at Dan Storey today, I know who that is. Or I know who it was. If I want to be Dan Storey tomorrow, I have to imagine something different, but I don't have reference points for that. And so immediately what happens, if it's a big enough gap and a big enough ambition, our brain kicks in and goes, nope, that's not you. That's not you. And we call that imposter syndrome. We call it self-doubt. We call it, just this idea of we're never going to make it. We get fear. We worry about what's going to happen. And then, what a lot of people do is they'll take 1 or 2 steps and then they'll go, oh, it's too much. And they'll back off. Right. So we've got to realize that there's a mindset shift we've got to go through to close that gap, that mindset gap between our current self-image and our future self-image. And the way we do that is by showing up. We have to use discipline and show up and do the things that are going to close the gap. And then the last one is work. Now, I am not sorry to say, because I think we all go through our journeys, but when I was younger, I thought there was a hack for everything. I thought there must be a shortcut. I thought there must be an easy way to get things done. I'm a smart guy, or at least I thought I was. There must be a way to think my way around this. And the reality is, you got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. And a lot of people don't realize that, the work rate to get to something extreme, and, we're talking about success. Success is not normal. We have to do things that are not normal. We have to move beyond our current comfort zone. And a lot of people talk about work-life balance and things nowadays. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. We can have different elements to our life, but we need to learn how to reinvest our time, our energy, our resources into our primary goals. And that means saying no to other areas. So this is this idea of sacrifice. Sacrifice not in the terms of goats and virgins getting thrown into volcanoes, but sacrifice like the chess player who says, I'm going to move my pawn here. I know it's going to get taken, but it's going to free up space and resource in the rest of the game that I can then use to have an advantage. So sacrifice is like a strategic advantage. So if I think about from a training perspective, for me, my sacrifice is cake, ice cream. I have a 4-year-old daughter. We go to the cake shop or the ice cream shop, and I have to watch her eating.
Exactly.
which is I'm really happy for her, but I'm salivating and trying not to kind of get too jealous. But that's before competition. I can safely tell you that after competition on the Saturday, the literally day after, we went for a giant ice cream in Las Vegas. We were both very happy, but a little sick afterwards. But it's this idea that I can't have both. I cannot have my cake and eat it, for literal metaphor there. And so what a lot of people do, the mistake they make is they try and keep everything the same and just make one tiny little tweak and expect that to change the results. And the reality is you've got to make some significant shifts in how you invest your time, money, and energy, the key resources you have available, if you want more significant results.
True. That is absolutely true. And I totally agree with everything you said. Great. So in your journey to becoming a top natural bodybuilder, how did you apply behavioral science principles to stay motivated and disciplined? One example you, of course, gave us, if you would like to share more.
So the biggest ones that you have to overcome are status quo bias. So status quo bias is the biggest thing that keeps people locked in place. And this is kind of what I was talking about. You have to do something radically different. I think it's Newton's first law of motion is an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay at motion unless a force is acted upon it. And if you've ever tried to get something going, I love the world's strongest men. Those guys are just incredible athletes. But you see them sometimes they're chained to an airplane. Right? Have you ever seen that? They're chained to an airplane. And they're like, okay, ready to say pull. And you're like, what? You're going to pull an airplane? And you see them just kind of hold onto this rope and gripping the floor with their feet and just like, and they're squeezing as hard as they possibly can. And the airplane doesn't move. Doesn't move anywhere. It's not going anywhere. And you're like, these guys are nuts. But sure enough, they keep squeezing, they keep pushing. And all of a sudden, that airplane rolls 1 inch. And you're like, it's moving. And, they don't rest. They keep squeezing it, keep pushing. And suddenly the airplane starts to go 2 inches and goes a little bit faster and starts rolling until the point where the end of the race, and it is a race, these guys are practically sprinting on the spot. They're moving their arms as fast as they can to pull the rope. And, the airplane is going, and there's a pilot in the airplane. He has to put the brakes on in the end. The plane is going so fast, the momentum is built up. But this is the biggest one, right? Status quo bias says we are most likely to stay still. We're most likely to stay in place unless you put force. But like I said earlier, as people try and do one or two little things, they give it a go for a day or two, it doesn't work. No, this doesn't work. We kind of use the excuses and we back out because maybe it wasn't that important. And we've got to realize we're actually trying to move an airplane. We're trying to move a giant piece of machinery, and that takes a disproportionate amount of energy at the beginning. I remember my journey of bodybuilding. I put in so much work in the gym. I was training really hard. I was in the kitchen. I was weighing every meal, like down to the gram of rice. I was like picking grams of rice out so I couldn't, go over my calorie allowance. It was a little insane. And every day I'd go into the gym and, I'd spend the end just looking in the mirror, seeing how my progress was going. And what sort I saw? Nothing. No change. There was still this guy in the mirror. It's like, oh my God, I look the same as yesterday and the same as the day before. We're not going anywhere. And a lot of
Happens.
people quit then. A lot of people quit, but you keep going, and it's almost always the last 10% of whatever you're going to put in is where you see all the results. So, understand that you're not going to see anything at the beginning, but you've got to keep showing up. You've got to keep doing the work, and eventually the momentum will build. But it takes a disproportionate amount of energy to get to that point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's, I think, one of the major reasons why people quit so quickly, because they want to see instant results. But
Yeah,
it will take a lot of time and discipline and consistency to show the results.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm. But isn't there a risk of over analyzing our motivations and behaviors to the point of paralysis, where we are so caught up in self reflection all the time that we fail to actually move forward?
There is. And I had a conversation the other day, and there's a lot of talk on the internet about optimization.
Mhm.
Optimization. Especially in the training area, you should get an extra stretch, or you should do this angle with your weights machines, or you should, eat
Mm.
this kind of protein versus this kind of protein, or you should sleep in an ice bath or something. I don't even know. It's like, just this optimization aspect. And if you look at my training and my nutrition, it's basic as heck. Like it's really not very complicated. I train hard, not too heavy, within a certain rep range. I make sure, I'm controlling the weights, but I'm not doing any super fancy exercises. I haven't got access to, this amazing technology or certain machines that, everybody say, oh, this is the best machine. This is the best machine. Nope. I just get in and do my work. And when it comes to cooking and in the kitchen, I make sure I hit my protein goal. I make sure I kind of keep my sugars low. It's really minimal. And actually, to be honest, this prep for this competition, I didn't weigh too much because I have an understanding of what food looks like and how hungry I should be and all those kind of things. And I'm second in the world now, you know. So is there room to grow? All the optimizers are going to say, well, you should have come first, Danny. If you'd optimized, you would have come first. I'm like, nah, you know what? I'm okay with second because I follow the fundamentals. And I think if we do the fundamentals, you can get most of the way just with fundamentals. So lift well, controlled, focus on the muscles, eat
Mm.
smart, and just do that. Just do that. Like I just started training with my neighbor. Actually, we had a couple of workouts together, and he's downloaded this program from the internet. And he's like, oh, I'm trying this program. He wants to get in shape for sport. He's like, is this good? I'm like, yeah, it looks good. It's just big compound lifts, nothing too complicated. Yeah, just do that. And it's really easy to follow. It's like, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. I said, just make sure you're going 3 times a week. And that's that for you is optimization. If you can get to the point where you're doing 3 times a week and you're kind of starting to eat a little bit smarter, then just do that. And I think it's really difficult. And I talk about this in my new book, which is this
Mhm.
idea of paradox of choice, is that when we have the ability to move forward, let's say you wanted to start a goal, you wanted to start a business, for example, and this is what a lot of people think is they go, well, what business should I start? And I have to get the best business, I have to get the business right, and I need to choose now. And should I do this model or that model, and what about this? And should I take part? We have so many choices to make. And so that's when we end up doing nothing. So the question is, what is the least amount of forward progression that you could take? And I was reading again Atomic Habits the other day. Habits is a great way of thinking about it. Is they're just small, consistent actions that you need to take. So if you're going to start a business, start a small business and like a side hustle, and get into the routine of doing the things that a business owner would do, like making sales calls or doing some outreach and some prospecting, or going and meeting clients and kind of testing products and ideas like that. And there's a guy called Chris Guillebeau who's written a couple of books. One's called The $100 Startup. You don't need to have tons of money to start a business. Just go and start something, or start something online. Literally, you can start a business today for free. Just start, do something to get into that frame of mind. Because to be honest, when I started my bodybuilding, I had no idea I was going to try and become Mr. Olympia. I was just going to do it as a challenge to see myself. And, eventually things pivot and you change and you go and do these things. And then it's like, okay, well, I ended up here. But if I'd waited to think about what the perfect thing was to move forwards, then I would have never started.
Definitely. Wow. So another important, uh, aspect, I believe, is mindfulness or self-awareness. So, in your experience, Dan, how does it help us identify and change these unhelpful patterns?
Self-awareness is key. Self-awareness, you need to understand your strengths and limitations and what you can do on your own versus what you need other people to do. So I have a coach for my training. Now, I have a degree in sports science. I studied a master's in nutrition. I know a lot of this stuff. And yet I have a coach. Why? Because I know that I need somebody else on my team thinking about this. I know that when I'm in my diet phase, my brain isn't working quite as well. And I need somebody else to have all the consciousness and full awareness and to be able to critique me. I know when I look in the mirror, I'm going to be self-critical. Yeah, so when I send my photos to my coach, he can be a little bit more objective and say, actually, yeah, you need to work on that bit, but that bit's really good. You're doing okay. Because all I see is flaws, right? And so I'm limited by my filters and my hypercriticalness. We'll go with that word. That's a new word. But I'm always going to critique myself harder than possibly others, and so I need a more objective view. And so I think this is it: is we can have self-awareness, but we need to have objective perspective as well. And I think the closer you can get with your view to objectivity, then that's what self-awareness is. So now I can look in the mirror, hopefully, and just say, okay, well, that looks good. I need to do some work, but not be overcritical and, treat myself with some kind of compassion. It's like, well, yeah, you're on track, but, you've got 2 weeks or 3 weeks to go. You don't need to panic. And this is the other thing that comes into people's like goals as well, is the timeline is not, it doesn't give people the best chance of success. So for me, for when I'm competing, I'll try and take 16 weeks to diet, and I might only need to lose a few kilos. But that's that's the timeline. So I don't stress on the day. I know there's change that needs to be done, but I also know I've got runway to do those things. So self-awareness and objectivity is pretty tricky. I used to do this with my team. So I've worked, like I said, in sales training for a long time. I get my trainers to create some content, like a training course or a program or something like that. And I say, right now, let's extract ourselves from the process and let's look at the entity that we've created and let's evaluate it without the self-interest of kind of confirming what we've written. And that's really difficult to step back and look at something that you've created objectively. That's a real skill. But that's what we need to do. And that's that self-awareness piece, is to be able to look at something and say, okay, well, this is good. This is not so good. Not be attached to it too much. And then say, okay, well, do we have a plan to improve things and change things? Yeah, well, let's get to it. But yeah, self-awareness as an objective thing and not a hypercritical thing, it's a tough skill and takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, it is. It is. Lovely, lovely, Dan. And before we wrap up this insightful conversation, for those of us who are looking to make a change, what's one small but impactful behavior we can start practicing daily to build momentum?
One thing that you can do to build momentum is, and I'm gonna go with this, right? I'm gonna go with this, and I talked about it yesterday, and it's something I always come back to, is figure out the thing that you would do regardless of getting paid. And there's this quote by Seth Godin which says, a lot of the motivational speakers say, what would you dare to do if you knew you couldn't fail? And it's, I would do this, I would do that, I would do this. Seth Godin flips it around a little bit and says, what would you dare to do if you knew you would fail, but you would do it anyway? And these are the things that we just feel compelled to do. For me, I couldn't not go to the gym. I couldn't live my life in a way that was authentic to me without training and without some form of physical exercise. It makes me feel alive. Same with writing. I need to write because that's how I understand and express myself in the world. There's certain things I have to do, like I have to speak and teach. I'm a teacher at heart. And when I'm not teaching, I don't feel like I'm being authentic. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday and they used the word intuition, which sounds a bit fluffy, but I think it's that inner voice that you listen to, or you should listen to, but we don't listen to. And everyone's got a little voice that is just whispering right now. It's just saying, hey, you remember that thing that we really used to do? Like you loved it. Let's go do some of that. And as we grow up, we don't listen to that voice. Well, oh, shut up. Yeah, we should go to work and we should do all these things and we have responsibilities now. It's like, no, it's not. It's what is that thing? What is that thing that you love to do? Is it you love to dance? Is it you love to sing? Is it you love to paint? Is it you love to, whatever it is, like code or do nerdy things like woodwork? And, do you love to cycle? Do you love to run? Do you love to swim? Do you love to dance in puddles? That kind of thing. Like, what is it you love to do and go and do it? And I think if you just do it a little bit, like every single day, that's going to reconnect you, I think, with who you are and why you do things. And whether you change your entire life, it's not about changing your entire life. It's just finding joy in the things that you do. The old enlightenment quote is, before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. And after enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. It's not what we do, it's how we approach what we do. And I think if we find joy and expression in everyday things and everything that we do, then that I think is a pretty good way of doing it. So listen to the little voice, get in touch with the things that you really love to do and that you would do regardless, and just go and do it, even if it's just for 5 minutes.
True. Beautiful, beautiful, Dan. What an incredible conversation. And thank you so much for taking us into the world of behavioral science and showing us how powerful mindset shifts can be instrumental in creating real change. So if our listeners, they want to connect with you and explore more about your resources, about your journey as well, how they can do that?
So there's two ways. I would say check out the website danstorey.com, DANSTOREY.com, or if people are looking to make some change and they really want to understand the psychology that goes behind it and make a proper change for themselves, check out Personal Transformation Blueprint on Amazon and Kindle. You can get that globally.
Great. We'll have all the details mentioned for all of our listeners. And I hope our listeners are as inspired as I am to take those first steps towards a long-lasting transformation. And I would like to add that change doesn't happen overnight. We have discussed this today. But with the right tools and a strong sense of purpose, anything is possible. So, Dan, thank you once again for sharing your expertise with us. And to our listeners, stay curious, stay mindful, and keep moving forward toward the life you envision. See you next time on Mindful Living. Thank you.